I hit someone with my car. They didn't make it. I can't go to jail, Nan. My promotion is tomorrow.
Please, Nan.
She walked out of those prison gates on a Tuesday morning. No one was waiting. The sky was gray. The air smelled like rain and exhaust fumes. And the only thing she had to her name was a small plastic bag with a change of clothes, $40 in cash, and a promise from a man who had already forgotten she existed. Her name was Meilyn, 21 years old, quiet, brilliant, the kind of woman who could light up a room just by walking into it, but never knew it. She had grown up in the Sunshine Bridge orphanage on the east side of Creston City, raised by nuns and night staff who rotated every few months. She never had a mother to call, never had a father to walk her down any aisle. What she had was a sharp mind, steady hands, and a dream so big it embarrassed her sometimes. She wanted to design jewelry, not costume pieces, not cheap fashion accessories. Real jewelry, the kind that told a story. The kind a woman passed down to her daughter who passed it down to hers. The kind that meant something long after the person who wore it was gone. But dreams like that cost money. And money was something Meilyn had never had. What she had instead was Daniel. But before we dive in, tell us your name and where you are watching us from. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Daniel Cho, 26 years old. Sales manager at a mid-size logistics company, sharp jaw, easy smile, the kind of man who made you feel like the only woman in the world, right up until the moment he needed something from you. They had dated for 2 years before the night that changed everything. It was raining that night, too. She remembered that detail because she had been waiting for him outside a restaurant, holding an umbrella, excited to celebrate the small design award she had just won from a local arts competition. It was nothing huge, just a certificate and a $300 prize. But it was the first time anyone had ever told her officially, professionally, that she had talent, that her hands made beautiful things. She wanted to share that moment with the man she loved. He arrived 40 minutes late, shirt untucked, eyes red, hands shaking. And what came out of his mouth next unraveled the next 3 years of her life. Meilyn,
Please, Nan.
I need you to listen to me.
I hit someone with my car.
I was in an accident.
Make it. I can't go to jail, Nan. My promotion
There was a
is
man
tomorrow.
crossing the street and
Please, Nan.
I didn't see him in time.
I hit someone with my car.
He's gone, Meilyn.
They didn't make it.
He didn't make
I can't
it.
go to jail,
And I
Nan.
cannot
my
go to
promotion
jail.
Is tomorrow.
My promotion review is in the
Please,
morning. My entire career. Everything I've worked for. If I go down for this, it's over. She stared at him. I need you to say you were driving. Please. I'm begging you. You have no job, no career, nothing that a conviction would destroy. But me, Meilyn, it would ruin me. When you get out, I swear to you, I will marry you. We'll have the life we always talked about. I'll take care of you forever. I just need you to do this one thing. She should have said no. Every logical part of her brain was screaming no, but love is not logical. And she was 21 years old and completely, blindly, dangerously in love with a man who was using that love like a weapon. She said yes. 3 days later, she stood in a courtroom in a gray dress she borrowed from a woman at the shelter and told a judge that she had been behind the wheel. She answered every question calmly. She did not cry. She did not look at Daniel sitting in the back of the room, watching her with an expression she would later understand was not gratitude. It was relief. Pure, selfish, cowardly relief. The judge sentenced her to 3 years. And as the bailiff led her away, she turned around one last time. Daniel was already on his phone. Prison has a way of teaching you things no classroom ever could. Meilyn spent the first 3 months in shock, the next 6 months in anger, and the remaining time in something that looked like peace but was actually just exhaustion, wearing a quieter mask. She read every book she could get her hands on. She sketched jewelry designs in the margins of notebook paper using borrowed pencils. She kept to herself. She caused no trouble. She helped an older woman in her block write letters to her grandchildren. She taught a younger girl how to read properly. She survived, and somewhere in that survival, something hardened inside her. Not her heart. Her heart stayed soft, which was both her greatest strength and her most dangerous vulnerability. But her spine. Her spine turned to something close to steel. She stopped crying over Daniel around month 8. By month 14, she barely thought about him. By month 20, she had made herself a quiet promise that when she walked out of that place, she would build something for herself so strong, so beautiful, so undeniably hers, that no one would ever again be able to use her love as a bargaining chip. She was going to be someone. She just didn't know yet that fate had already written the first chapter of that story. 3 weeks before her release date, something unexpected happened. A man came to see her. Not a lawyer, not a social worker, not Daniel. She had long since stopped expecting him. This man was in his late 70s, small in frame but enormous in presence. Silver hair combed neatly back. A tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than 6 months of the average person's salary. He walked with a carved mahogany cane, but held himself like someone who had never needed one. His name was Grandfather Juan. He sat down across from her in the visitation room, folded his hands on the table, and looked at her for a long moment before he spoke. "Miss Meilyn, my name is Juan Bojan. I am the patriarch of the Juan family. Perhaps you have heard of us, perhaps not. It does not matter. What matters is why I am here." She waited. "My grandson," he said, "has been in a coma for 6 months. He is 28 years old. He is the CEO of the Juan Group, which employs over 40,000 people across 9 countries. He is also the last of our family line, and he is dying." Meilyn said nothing. "The cause," Grandfather Juan continued, "is a severe and rare blood disorder. His body cannot produce enough healthy red blood cells to sustain normal function. We have searched every registered blood bank in this country. We have contacted specialists in 4 continents. We have offered sums of money that I am embarrassed to say out loud in a place like this." He paused. "And then last week, our medical team found a match." He looked at her steadily. "You." Meilyn felt something shift in the room, in the air, in herself. "Your blood type and specific cellular markers are compatible in a way that occurs in fewer than 1 in 3 million people," he said. "The doctors believe a direct donation from you could stabilize his condition and potentially bring him out of the coma entirely." "And if I say yes?" she asked quietly. "I will use every resource and every relationship I have to have your remaining sentence commuted. You will walk out of here a free woman within the week. You will also receive a private medical consultation, full recovery care, and a financial settlement for your time and your sacrifice." "And if I say no?" Grandfather Juan looked at her without blinking. "Then I go home and watch my grandson die, and you serve the rest of your sentence, and neither of us benefits from this conversation." Meilyn looked down at her hands, the hands that sketched jewelry in notebook margins, the hands that had been steady in a courtroom when they should have been shaking. "When do we start?" she said. She gave 800 milliliters of blood. The medical team was quiet and professional. Grandfather Juan waited outside the entire time. When it was done and she was lying in the recovery bed, pale and dizzy and thinner than she should have been, he came in and sat beside her without being asked. "You didn't flinch," he said. "I grew up in an orphanage," she said simply. "You learn not to flinch at things that are just going to happen anyway." He was quiet for a moment. "You're a remarkable young woman, Miss Meilyn." "I'm just tired, Mr. Juan, and I want to go home." "Where is home?" She almost laughed. "I'll figure that out." He nodded slowly, and something in his eyes shifted, something that looked a lot like a plan forming. She was released on a Tuesday. The sky was gray again. It seemed like the sky was always gray when her life changed. She stood at the gate with her small plastic bag and her $40 and the quiet certainty that she was going to have to figure everything out from scratch. She had already decided she would not go looking for Daniel. Whatever he had promised her meant nothing now. She had seen his true face in that courtroom. She had read it in every letter that never came, every visit that never happened, every birthday that passed in silence. She was done. What she had not decided yet was what to do about the fact that she had nowhere to sleep tonight. She was still working through that problem when she heard a car door open. A black vehicle. Long and polished and quietly expensive in the way that didn't need to announce itself. And standing beside it, cane in hand, silver hair gleaming even under a gray sky, Grandfather Juan. "I told you I would come," he said. "You didn't have to do that." "I am aware." He gestured toward the car. "Get in, child. You look like you haven't eaten a real meal in 3 years." "That's because I haven't." He almost smiled. "Then let's fix that first." She ate at a restaurant she could never have afforded on her own. Real food, warm bread, and a proper meal and tea that actually tasted like something. Grandfather Juan sat across from her and watched her eat with an expression she couldn't quite read. When she was done, he folded his hands on the table exactly the way he had in the visitation room. "My grandson," he said, "woke up 4 days ago." She looked up. "He's okay?" "He's recovering, slowly." "But yes, the transfusion worked exactly as the doctors hoped." He paused. "He doesn't know it was you. I haven't told him the details yet. You don't have to. The deal was the deal. I gave blood. You got me out. We're even." "We are not even," he said firmly. "What you did was extraordinary, and I am not a man who forgets extraordinary things." She waited. "I have a proposal," he said. "Not a demand, a proposal. You are free to refuse, and if you do, I will arrange a comfortable apartment for you and a sum of money to help you get back on your feet. No conditions." "But," she said. "But," he continued, "I would like you to consider marrying my grandson." The restaurant noise continued around them. Someone laughed at a nearby table. A waiter walked past with a tray of coffee cups. Meilyn stared at Grandfather Juan. "I'm sorry," she said. "I think I misheard you." "You did not mishear me. You want me to marry a man I have never met." "You have technically met him. He was simply unconscious at the time. That doesn't count." "I am aware." He leaned forward slightly. "Miss Meilyn, my grandson is 28 years old. He has spent the last 6 months in a hospital bed and the 6 months before that running a corporation that has more moving parts than most governments. He is brilliant and hard-working, and also, I will be honest with you, enormously stubborn and not particularly warm to strangers. He will fight me on this. He fights me on most things. And yet you're asking me. Because I have watched people my entire life. It is one of the few useful skills that comes with being very old." He looked at her steadily. "You sat in a visitation room and made a life-altering decision without panicking. You gave blood for a stranger without asking for reassurance. You walked out of prison this morning with nothing and you were already problem-solving before I reached you. That is not a common kind of person, Miss Meilyn." She was quiet for a long moment. "If I said yes," she said slowly, "it would not be because I wanted to marry your grandson." "I understand." "It would be because I have nowhere to go, and I need time to build something for myself." "I understand that too." "And the moment he found someone he actually loved, someone he chose, I would walk away. No drama, no demands." Grandfather Juan nodded. "Those terms are acceptable." "I'm not finished," she said. "I also want to be clear that I am not going to pretend to be something I'm not. I grew up in an orphanage. I have a criminal record. I have nothing, and I am not going to be ashamed of any of that." Something in Grandfather Juan's expression shifted. Something that might, if you were watching closely enough, have looked like admiration. "I would not want you to be," he said. She picked up her tea, looked at it, set it down. "Tell me about him," she said. His name was Juan Zicken, 28 years old, only grandson of Juan Bojan, founder of the Juan Group, a corporation that had its fingers in real estate, technology, international shipping, and luxury manufacturing. Zicken had taken over as CEO at 25, after his parents died in a boating accident off the coast of Portugal. He had restructured 3 failing divisions, opened offices in 2 new countries, and increased the company's annual revenue by 40% in his first year alone. He was also, by every account grandfather Juan gave, exhausting to be around. "He does not trust easily," the old man said carefully. "He is used to people wanting something from him. He is used to being managed and maneuvered and approached at angles. It has made him sharp and careful and a little unkind sometimes to people he does not yet understand." "In other words," Meilyn said, "he's going to make my life difficult." "Almost certainly. Yes. And you still think this is a good idea?" "I think," Grandfather Juan said, "that you are the first person in a long time who could not possibly want something from him that he hasn't already accounted for. And I think that will confuse him in ways that might be good for him." She almost smiled at that. Almost. "All right," she said. "Let's go meet your grandson." The Juan family estate sat at the end of a private road lined with old oak trees. The house itself was enormous, white stone and tall windows, and a garden that had clearly been maintained by professionals for decades. It looked like something out of a film, the kind of place Meilyn had pressed her face against magazines to see when she was a child. She sat in the back of the car as it pulled through the gates and told herself very firmly that she was not impressed. She was a little impressed. Zicken was in the East Wing sitting room when they arrived. He had been home from the hospital for 2 days and was already visibly frustrated by the limitation of his own recovery. He was seated in an armchair near the window, a laptop open on the side table beside him, phone in hand, looking like a man who had decided that being recently out of a coma was no reason to stop working. He was also, and Meilyn registered this with strict neutrality, objectively and unfairly good-looking, tall frame even seated, strong jaw, dark eyes with the particular quality of someone who processed everything they saw and filed it away for later. He was pale from months of illness and thinner than he probably normally was, but even that could not quite diminish the impression he made when he looked up and saw her. His eyes moved from her to his grandfather and back again. "Grandfather," he said, in a voice that was extremely calm and therefore extremely dangerous, "who is this?" "This is Meilyn. She is going to be your wife." The silence that followed was very long. "I see," Zicken said finally. "And was I consulted in this decision?" "You were unconscious. I am no longer unconscious. You are also no longer in a position to be as stubborn as you normally are," Grandfather Juan said serenely. "You need care. You need someone in this house. And the staff situation has become complicated since your illness." "Hire new staff." "I have someone better." Grandfather Juan gestured toward Meilyn with the quiet confidence of a man who had been winning arguments for 7 decades. "Meilyn is sensible, capable, and has agreed to this arrangement with full understanding of its terms. She will live here during your recovery. You will attend 2 public events together to dispel the rumors about your death that have been circulating for the past 6 months and affecting our stock price. And you will treat her with basic human decency." Zicken looked at Meilyn. She looked back at him. "So," he said, "you're here to be a glorified caretaker with a marriage certificate." "I prefer to think of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement," she said evenly. "You get someone to help manage your recovery and your public image. I get a place to stay and time to build my own future. We stay out of each other's way. When you meet someone you actually want to marry, I leave. Simple." He studied her for a moment. "You're not nervous," he said. It sounded almost like an accusation. Should I be? Most people are, when they meet me. I spent 3 years in prison, Mr. Wan. You're going to have to work harder than a nice suit and a cold stare to intimidate me. Something very small shifted in his expression. Not warmth, exactly. More like recalculation. Fine, he said. He looked back at his laptop. Grandfather, show her to a room, and tell the kitchen to make something. I assume she hasn't eaten properly in years. It was not kindness. It was efficiency. But Meilyn stored it away anyway because she had learned a long time ago that the beginning of a thing rarely looked like what it was eventually going to become. The first 2 weeks were not easy. Grandfather Wan left for his long-delayed trip to Europe 4 days after Meilyn arrived, leaving her alone in the estate with Zishan, a rotating skeleton crew of staff, and a housekeeper named Mrs. Fay, who had worked for the Wan family for 30 years and had opinions about everything. Mrs. Fay did not approve of Meilyn. This was made clear in small but consistent ways. The best rooms somehow always needed airing out when Meilyn wanted to use them. Meals were served to Zikin first, and Meilyn's plates arrived lukewarm. Information about the household, the schedule, the routines where things were kept, was given sparingly and only when asked directly. And then one morning, Meilyn came downstairs to find that the kitchen staff had been given an unexpected day off. She cooked breakfast herself. Simple things: rice porridge, soft boiled eggs, steamed vegetables with a light sauce. She set a place at the table, put Zikin's portion at his preferred spot by the window, and sat down with her own bowl. He came down in a loose shirt, still moving carefully because his legs were not fully healed, and stopped when he saw the table. "Where is the kitchen staff?" "Day off, apparently." He looked at the food. "You cooked this?" "Someone had to." He sat down, picked up his spoon, ate a mouthful of porridge. The silence stretched. Daniel made his move 3 days later. He had clearly been tracking the news, the stories about Zikin's return to public life, the photographs from the charity dinner, the speculation about the mysterious wife of the Wan heir. He had seen Meilyn's face in those photographs. He had done his math, and he had decided that information was currency. He called a journalist, a tabloid journalist specifically, with a particular taste for stories that combined wealth and scandal. He told this journalist that the wife of Wan Zikin had served time for a hit-and-run fatality, that she was a convicted criminal with no family connections and no legitimate claim to the Wan name. He suggested that she had manipulated an elderly man in poor health. He implied things he could not prove and stated things he misrepresented entirely. The story went up online at 7 in the morning. Meilyn saw it at 7:12. She read it twice, carefully, the way she had learned to read everything, looking for what was true, what was distorted, and what was a lie engineered to look like truth. Then she put her phone face down on the table, finished her tea, and went to find Zikin. He was already in the study, phone in hand, expression set in the particular way it set when he was managing something he was furious about with perfect external control. He looked up when she came in. "I've seen it," she said. "My legal team is already—" "Zikin." She sat down across from him. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting." He put his phone down. She told him about the evidence. All of it. The paramedics' report. The phone records she had obtained showed that Daniel's personal phone had been used to call an insurance company about a vehicle damage claim the morning after the accident, before the crime was even reported, before any investigation, which meant he had been managing the aftermath in real time while she was being arrested. The testimony she had quietly secured from 2 of Daniel's former colleagues, confirming that he had bragged privately about how he had handled the situation. She laid it all out on the desk between them. He looked at the documents for a long time. "Why didn't you use this earlier?" he asked, finally. "Because the timing wasn't right," she said, "and because I wanted it to be airtight before I moved. If it's not airtight, he walks again." She paused. "But this story changes the timeline. He forced my hand early, so I need that lawyer today." Zechen looked at her. In the 6 weeks since she had come to live in his house, he had watched this woman wash floors and cook meals and weather hostility from his staff and stand in a hotel ballroom across from the man who had destroyed years of her life without flinching. He had watched her sketch beauty from nothing. He had watched her refuse every easy path offered to her because she was determined, profoundly, immovably determined, to build something real. He picked up his phone. "Marcus," he said when it connected, "I need you at the estate within the hour. Bring whichever colleague you trust most in criminal proceedings. And bring the kind of energy you reserve for cases you are absolutely going to win." He paused, looking at Meilyn. "Yes, it's that important." He hung up. "Thank you," she said. "Stop thanking me," he said. "I told you, it's the minimum." But this time, something in his voice was different from the first time he'd said it. And they both knew it. The case against Daniel Cho took 11 days. The legal team Zechen provided was extraordinary, not because they were expensive, but because they were meticulous. They obtained the original accident report. They tracked down the paramedic whose notes described a male driver. They retrieved the insurance call recording through channels that were entirely legal and somewhat creative. They located a woman named Ji Hyun, a gas station attendant who had been working the night of the accident and had not been interviewed at the time because no one had thought to look for her, who had seen a man in a dark vehicle stop at the station 6 minutes before the accident was reported and ask for directions. She identified Daniel Cho from a photograph without hesitation. The case was presented to the prosecutor's office on Thursday. By Friday, Daniel's company had placed him on administrative leave. By the following Tuesday, he had been formally charged. He tried to reach Meilyn twice. Once by phone, she did not answer. Once through a lawyer who sent a letter suggesting she might be interested in a private settlement. She read the letter, wrote a single word on it, and sent it back. No. The story in the tabloid had already been overtaken by the larger story, the actual story, the real one. The one where a young woman had spent 3 years in prison for a crime she didn't commit. The one where she had used that time to become someone extraordinary rather than someone broken. The one where she had come home and quietly, methodically built the case that brought her accuser to justice. The coverage was not entirely comfortable. There were pieces that lingered too long on her prison record. There were commenters who asked questions that were really accusations in disguise. There was the particular kind of scrutiny that public life imposes on women who refuse to be pitied. She read most of it, filed what was useful, ignored the rest. And then one morning she walked downstairs and found Grandfather Juan sitting at the kitchen table, having apparently returned from his European travels some days early, eating congee as if he had never left. "Grandfather," she said. "Meilyn." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit. Eat. You look thin. You sound like you never left." "In spirit, I never did." He poured her tea. "I have been following things from abroad. You handled this beautifully." "I handled it the only way I could," she said, "which was carefully and without letting anyone rush me." "Yes." He looked at her over his cup. "How is my grandson?" She paused. "He's good," she said. Actually, he's good. His legs are almost fully recovered. He's been back on video calls with the company for the last week. She stopped. Grandfather Juan was looking at her with an expression she recognized from the day they had first spoken. That look of a man who had watched people for 7 decades and saw very clearly the things they were not quite saying. "He's been different," she said carefully, "than I expected." "Different how?" "He listens," she said. "He's frustrating and stubborn, and he never apologizes directly for anything. But he listens, really listens, and he—" She stopped again. "He sees me. Not the prison record, not the orphan, not the convenient wife. Just me. Grandfather Juan said nothing. That wasn't supposed to happen, she said quietly. No, he agreed, but the best things rarely happen on schedule. She looked at her tea. We made an agreement, she said. Agreements can be renegotiated, he said mildly. That is, in fact, the basis of most successful human relationships. I don't want him to feel... Meilyn. His voice was gentle but clear. Has my grandson said anything to you? Indicated anything? She was quiet for a moment. She thought about the library evenings, the garden, the word yes, sitting between them in the air like something waiting to be claimed. He said something might be serious, she said, when he spoke to Serena Park. Grandfather Juan made a small sound that might have been satisfactory. Go talk to him, he said. It's not, go, talk to him. I am old and I have seen enough of life to tell you that very few people are given what you two have been given. Do not waste it by being careful when it is no longer necessary to be careful. She sat with that for a moment. Then she got up. She found him in the garden. He had been walking, actually walking, unassisted, the cane finally set aside for the first time, along the path between the old oak trees. He turned when he heard her, and his face did the thing it had started doing recently, the thing she had tried not to read too much into. It opened, slightly. A fraction of softness crossing the composed exterior. Grandfather is back, she said. I know. I heard him interrogating the kitchen staff about my diet. She stopped in front of him. Zekin, she said. I need to say something and I need you to not be efficient about it. I need you to just listen. He looked at her, nodded once. When I came here, she said, I had a plan, a simple one. Stay out of your way. Use the time to rebuild. Leave when you find someone else. That was the whole plan. She paused. I didn't account for you being who you actually are, rather than who I expected you to be. He said nothing, watching her. I didn't account for the library evenings, or for the way you called for the staff after the laundry, or for the fact that when I told you about Daniel, you asked what I needed instead of telling me what you were going to do. She took a breath. I didn't account for the fact that being around you would start to feel like the most natural thing that's happened to me in years. Silence. I'm not asking for anything, she said quickly. I know that's not... Meilyn, he said. I know our arrangement was... Meilyn! She stopped. He looked at her for a long moment. The oak trees moved in the morning wind above them. Somewhere distant, inside the house, Grandfather Juan was probably listening at a window. When you left the prison, Zekin said slowly, and came to my house, you were a name on a medical report to me. A situation my grandfather had created, something to be managed. He paused. And then you stood in my sitting room and told me that you were not there for me. You were there for a roof, and I was so startled, because no one in my life had ever said something so honest to me so immediately. She was very still. And then the cooking happened, he said. And the garden. And the sketchbook. And you tell me about your dream with that expression you get where you forget to be careful because the thing you're talking about is too important to be careful about. He looked at her. I didn't account for any of that either. She breathed. The agreement, she started. I don't want to talk about the agreement, he said. I want to talk about what I actually want, which is for you to stay. Not because of my grandfather, not because of public image or recovery or mutual benefit, because this, he gestured between them, is the realest thing that has happened to me since my parents died, and I am not, as it turns out, willing to manage my way around that. The garden was very quiet. I have a record, she said. I know. I have nothing. No family, no background, no... I have enough of all of those things for several lifetimes, he said. I do not need more. I still want to build my jewelry company, she said. On my own, without your money. I know that too. Something in his expression softened the rest of the way. I will watch you do it, from a respectful distance, and try not to interfere. You will definitely try to interfere. Almost certainly, but I will try not to. He held out his hand. Stay, Meilyn, not as a convenient arrangement. Stay because you want to. She looked at his hand. She thought about the woman she had been 3 years ago, standing in a courtroom in a borrowed gray dress, making a sacrifice for someone who had already decided to spend it. She thought about the woman she had been 6 weeks ago, walking out of a prison gate with $40 in a plastic bag and the very beginning of something that was going to become everything. She thought about the woman she was now. She took his hand. She launched her jewelry brand 8 months later. She called it Bridge Light, for the Sunshine Bridge Orphanage, for the light she had always been looking for the small and beautiful thing of finding your way from one side to the other. She did it herself. Every piece of capital earned through a design competition she had entered under a pseudonym and won. Every supplier she found and negotiated with herself. Every piece in the first collection was drawn by her hand and refined and perfected and imperfect in the ways that made it hers. The launch happened in a small gallery space in the arts district of Creston City. Nothing enormous. 40 guests. Clean white walls and warm lighting and the jewels laid out in glass cases like the small stories they were. Zikin came. He sat in the back and he did not interfere. He watched her move through the room, talking to buyers, explaining her process, laughing at something a journalist said, with an expression that he did not bother to conceal, because by this point, he had stopped bothering to conceal most things where she was concerned. Grandfather Juan came too. He wore his best suit and cried a little and pretended he had something in both eyes. The collection sold out in 3 hours. A buyer from a luxury department store chain approached her at the end of the evening. She took the meeting, listened to the offer, thanked them for their time, and said she would think about it. She was not ready to scale yet. She wanted the second collection to be even better than the first. On the way home, sitting in the back of Zikin's car with her shoes off and her head tilted back against the seat, she thought about all of it. Everything. The courtroom and the cell and the prison gate and the estate and the garden and the library and the way love had found her in a completely illogical place by a completely improbable route. You were shining in there, Zikin said quietly. She looked at him. Was I watching too obviously? He asked. A little, she said. I didn't mind. He reached over and took her hand without looking away from the window, the same way she had taken his in the garden, simply without announcement, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. It was. Daniel Cho was convicted 14 months after Meilyn's release, 3 years and 2 months minus time served, though he had served none. He would serve it all. Meilyn heard the verdict by phone, standing in her studio. She had a studio now, a real one, a rented space with good north light and a long work table covered in tools and sketches and the quiet, beautiful mess of making things. She sat down on the workbench stool when she heard the words. She had expected to feel triumph. She had expected satisfaction or relief or the particular cold pleasure of justice arriving exactly where it was supposed to. What she felt instead was released. The quiet, unexpected, devastating lightness of something that has been carried for a very long time is finally, permanently set down. She sat in her studio for a while, let herself feel it, did not try to manage it or file it away. Then she called Zikin. It's done, she said. A pause. Are you okay? He asked. Yes, she said, and meant it. Come home, he said. Grandfather is making dinner. He has announced that he is cooking personally, which means we should probably also order something just in case. She laughed. The laugh came up from somewhere deep and real and unguarded. "I'll be there in an hour," she said. She sat for another moment after the call ended. In her studio, in the good north light, surrounded by the evidence of her own making. She had walked out of prison with nothing. No money, no family, no plan. And somehow, through sacrifice and stubbornness, and the particular grace of finding exactly the right people at exactly the wrong moment, she had arrived here, at a life that was entirely, completely, irrevocably hers. She picked up her sketchbook, opened it to a clean page, and began. Leave a comment below. What was your favorite moment in today's story? Make sure you are subscribed.